And we'll get going. Okay, so look, Katrina made a nice introduction there to myself. I have some of my background statistics up there around my certifications, but I suppose hopefully more importantly is my experience in these areas. So obviously I'm an experienced project manager. I'm also a certified Scrum practitioner from Scrum Alliance, as well as a Kanban practitioner as well. So I kind of have the background to kind of see both sides of the traditional project management and the agile elements, mostly from a software background, software companies, working mostly in financial services, but not always. There's some of my own details, my own background. So if you want to contact me, you can take a snap there. I'd be delighted to hear from you, or I'm on LinkedIn. But the first thing I want to go for is have a look at the Agile Principles, okay? You can see them in front of you there. There's quite a lot of wording in those, but first I just want to introduce them to you, and then I'm going to go a little bit lower into each of these principles and try and figure out what behaviors support these principles. But first, I just want to kind of maybe just even kind of get them across to you about what we're trying to do. You may have seen these principles before. You may have felt some of them are applicable to your business, and other ones are difficult to implement. But really, I want to get across the behaviors. So there's 12 Agile principles around the different ways that we want to kind of structure Agile. And this is applicable to any type of Agile implementation, from Scrum to Kanban or any other lean approach that you want to take. So the 12 principles start off with the highest priority is to satisfy the customer through continuous delivery. So not to leave all of the project deliverables till the end. We need to ship them out as we go. Okay, great. Welcoming change. That's a kind of a weird one for a lot of us many years ago, where we had this whole concept of change requests and we kind of pushed back on change requests. This actually concept here is to welcome the change requests. By welcoming them, we're actually saying, great, brilliant, I want the change requests, which is a weird one for us. Delivering working software, or if it's not software, working stuff, I've used the word frequently. Try and get stuff shipped out on a weekly basis, 2 weekly or 3 weekly. Again, not waiting till the end to deliver. The next one is a strange one, and I'll probably go on about this one quite a bit later on. Getting business people and developers to work together really, really regularly. Trying to break the barriers between the doers and the business people. This has caused us huge problems in lots of projects where there isn't a proper connection between them. Build people around motivated people. Motivated individuals is the fifth principle there. And support people to make their own decision making. Another great one to have there. And the most efficient, the sixth one there, the most efficient and effective method of conveying information is face-to-face. Now, we've all experienced this, the email that has wound us up. And a huge amount of Agile is around trying to cut out these big, long documents that go on forever that nobody ever reads. I often talk about the test that I did once with one of the development teams, where on the second page we wrote a little description and said, whoever reads this, I'll buy you a pint. We distributed the design document, and nobody ever called me back to say, Dave, you owe me a pint, I found this. And nobody even came back to me and said that was quite unprofessional of me to put a line into the middle of a design document, because nobody ever even looked past the second page. So this is what's happening, and this is fairly common in a lot of software development, where people skim through these. So why write these big ones? Have face-to-face. Lots of other measures out there. Working software is the primary measure. None of these statistics about how we started this. It's actually working in use by the customer is the measure. Promoting a sustainable pace. None of these deadlines. Trying to get to a situation where we are delivering at a constant pace. That makes things more measurable. It makes things more predictable. Because one of the challenges that we have in Agile is, how do I predict how long it's going to take me to get to the end? How long will it take me to get the regulatory requirement done if we're working in this agile environment? Well, this kind of tries to tackle that by saying, okay, we're going to work at a sustainable pace, and if we've got a measurable pace, then we can predict the future. Attention to technical quality, making sure that if we see technical problems in the system, that we actually fix them. And this goes against some people's thinking, you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, they're saying actually in the Agile principle here, we're actually saying, well, hold on a second. If there's something that's going to cause problems in the future, let's fix it. Maximizing the work not done, great idea. I mean, that's an easy principle for us to pick on. Stop doing stuff that doesn't add value. So trying to get back to stuff that's actually adding value. The 11th principle then is around the architectures, and that the people delivering the work, the team delivering the work, actually are better at organizing themselves. This is intellectual work. We're not digging holes in fields. This is intellectual work with smart people from a knowledge economy. They're pretty smart people, so they can self-organize. Now, when you think about that, you've just allowed the team to self-organize who within that team is going to do the work. We do need a structure on that, otherwise it will be chaotic. It's not laissez-faire management, but it's a mechanism that allows people to work together. And the 12th principle, which I think my Agile friends do extremely well, you might call this lessons learning, but it's more than lessons learning. The word that's often used in Agile is retrospectives, but stopping regularly and not just learning lessons, but figuring out how could we be better? Some time out from the team to say, great, how could we be better? How could we do things better? And most Agile teams will do that at least once a month, some of them every 2 weeks, and it's a self-reflection. It's not just trying to learn lessons from other teams, but it's first and foremost a self-reflection. And I would sort of say that it's probably one of the first things that good teams do. And if you've worked on a good project in the past, it's probably what you saw being done on a good project. Really good lessons learned, not just at the end, throughout. Okay. So they're the Agile principles. I'd like to get you guys to think a little bit for a few minutes. Katrina's going to throw up a little survey on Menti. So if you remember the code, which is 228272, Katrina's going to throw up the code with the 4 short questions, where you're going to have to pick 2 statements. I'd love if you guys could have a go at that now on your phones. Just trying to lead you down a thinking pathway with it. So have a look at it.
Okay, so David, I'll actually pop it up on the screen as well now, just so people can see it.
Yeah, great.
I'm just going to move it across. Sorry, guys, just a little bit of technical stuff while I change screens. And people are already answering it, which is great. So change me. Hopefully you guys can see this.
Very colorful.
Right, and hopefully David, you can see that as well. So we have slightly modified what Menti is meant to be used for here, but the idea is if you agree with the statement on your left, individuals and interaction, vote 1 or 2, and if you agree with the statement, process and tools, then maybe vote 4 or 5.
Okay, and we've got 4 of these, so we can move on to the next one and the next one. Is that okay, Katrina?
Yeah, absolutely. You want me to move forward?
Well, whenever you're happy enough. I'm not sure how we count how many people have got it, but yeah, move on to the next one. That'll be good.
Okay, so I'm moving forward. So that was the first question, guys. I'm just going to move to the second one now. So based on previous projects, which of these 2 factors contributed most to the success? Is it the working software or the comprehensive documentation?
And if you're not from a software background, you know,
might be
working
some foregone
deliveries.
Conclusions. Yeah, working deliveries, working software, or comprehensive documentation. David, documentation's not really winning this one here, is it?
No, it's not, because we all hate it. I do a little bit of a test with people, and you may have seen this before. Our Agile friends are full of games. They love games, but this is a serious game where I get people to write down a problem on a piece of paper and hand it to somebody else and ask them to solve it, and they don't solve it right. It's a poor solution. It's a very simple problem. It's dead easy. And then I ask people, right, let's change it. Here's a new problem, and have a face-to-face discussion. And when they have the face-to-face discussion, first of all, the first thing you notice in the face-to-face discussion, it's a bit of fun. The thing you notice when you ask somebody to write it down, they were worried. They were looking at me going, sorry, how do I do this? You want me to write a description of what? Whereas when I asked them to talk face-to-face, there was a lot of clarification. There was a lot of individual clarification. They didn't need me to explain them how to do the task. They naturally built up how to do the task. And at the end, it's closer. Time-wise, it's the same. It's precisely the amount, same time. Effort-wise, it's the same. But what comes across is that, first of all, it's more energetic. And secondly, it's closer to what the user had said in the first place. And that really is used. I can't remember the name of the game, but you can call it Drawing Monsters as a version of it. I can't remember the name of the one that I taken from another Agile coach, but it does kind of show you, and it gets people across, these big long documents need explanation. Why don't we just talk about it and stop wasting our time writing big long documents? I know that's a challenge in a way. Do you want to pop up the third one, Katrina?
Here you go. So customer collaboration or contract negotiation. So one, if you agree with customer collaboration as being the factor that contributed most to success, and I guess 5, if you think it was contract negotiation. So you've got 46 responses there already, David, and that's...
Yeah, I did this one many years ago, particular question with a bunch of guys from one of the consultancy firms, okay? And they got a little bit, I won't say annoyed at me or upset, but they got challenged by this question, because although they felt that the customer collaboration was really important, they personally felt that their boss was absolutely around the contract. They had to have the contract in place. Change requests had to be charged for. We had to have our timing on this. So although they felt personally customer collaboration was really high, the contract negotiation and all that sort of stuff, they felt that their bosses were pushing that. I never got an opportunity to ask their bosses what they thought, but I would imagine their bosses would have said the exact same thing again, that they want to move towards customer collaboration, but the organization pushes them towards contract negotiation as being the main thing. Okay, do you want to take number 4, which is the most interesting of all?
So there you go, guys. So responding to change or following a plan. It's interesting, David, actually, with the contract negotiation, in one job I had previously, we used to say that a good contract well written was, of course, very important, but if you had a good relationship with your customer and if both parties agreed and collaborated well with each other, that contract would stay in the drawer and would never be looked at ever again for the lifetime of the project.
Yeah.
I think you might have upset our project managers here. We're veering the closest to following a plan here then. And maybe this is probably one of the things with Agile as well that project managers, or speaking for myself here as well, that we are most nervous about. Unfortunately, we have a lot of experience of rogue Agile. And it is important to note that Agile does follow a plan. There are plans in Agile.
100%. There absolutely is a plan. And this one here, actually, this is not as unbalanced. This is more balanced towards responding to change than I get a lot of the time. Certainly, if I work with public sector, it actually moves much more towards following a plan. And in some public sector, they've actually moved, particularly in compliance business, they go, no, following the plan is 100%, responding to change, that's next year. So I'm actually surprised. There's quite a people who are towards responding to change. And yes, we do need to have a plan. There is absolutely no doubt. We cannot do Agile without a plan. Okay, there is, if you take something as simple as Scrum, there is a plan. We see it, it's a plan of tasks. It's a list. We are going to commit to that list. Now, the challenge really is, how far out do you go with a plan? And secondly, how many dates do you put against plan? The Agilistas out there are not keen on dates, and I think that's fine, but senior managers needs dates. So we do have to work on a balance. And normally, again, I'll use Scrum as my example. Normally what we'll do is a Scrum Master isn't too worried about dates, but a product owner is going, yes, we need to hit dates. We need to get across dates. Okay?
Yeah.
Good. Right. I'm going to, can you pop me back up, Katrina?
I can indeed.
I'll just move on to.
Here you go, guys. I'm just handing back to David now, so we'll go back to the slides.
Show my screen. Is that the right screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So look, this is the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto that is 20 years old now. A bunch of people, and I can say, guys, I think it's 17 of them, got together and sat down. You've just answered these, by the way. And they sat down. They had worked on projects in the past. They had done lots of projects. A lot of them had followed different mechanisms for doing them. There was a project management method out there, obviously from the PMI was popular in the US because they're US centric. There was a software project development mechanism out there from IBM, which was quite popular at the time, called RUP, Rational Unified Something or Other Programming. And another guy had invented a thing called XP. So there's all these different mechanisms out there, and they tried to come back with a unified theory. Get it all together into theory. And after a few days, this is as far as they got. They basically said that individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools. That working software is more important than comprehensive documentation, which RUP wouldn't have done a very good job of. Customer collaboration is much more important than contract negotiation, because a lot of the projects in the late 90s, we were getting into huge trouble. Yeah. If anybody was around in those days or thinks back, we were getting into a lot of trouble because we were moving from mainframe to minis or minis to PCs. Lots of projects were going overrun. And responding to change was more important than following a plan. So these guys came together to try and create one mechanism, trying to say that a lot of the predefined ways of doing work was not working for software development. And the reason it wasn't working for software development was very clearly, we didn't know what we want and we didn't know how to do it. So if we don't know what we want and we don't know how to do it, then why are we following a plan? Because we need to experiment to learn what we're doing and for the users to learn what they need, because the users don't know what they need either. We've all experienced that. So this idea here is to try and put together a mechanism that will understand that there is a little bit of chaos in here that needs to be managed. Now, while the light blue stuff is important, we value the dark blue more so. That's not to say that we don't have processes, we don't have documentation, but we're saying if in case of documentation, working software is more important. That's what we're trying to get to. And some Agilistas out there kind of go, no, we don't need documentation at all. Well, that's not what the Agile Manifesto says. It says working software is more important than comprehensive documentation. Okay. So just a couple of things around Agile. Remember when we talk about Agile, there's multiple things in Agile. There's loads of stuff in Agile. There are many, many Agile techniques and tools out there. There's not just one, okay? Scrum is probably the one that's talked about the most. There's a very well developed engine behind Scrum. which push it out. There's at least 2 organizations that push Scrum really, really well, Scrum.org and Scrum Alliance. There's a 3rd organization that are getting a little bit stronger now as well. And there's a multitude of lower level organizations that are pushing Scrum. It certainly has its place. A simpler technique is Kanban. Anybody who's done a little bit of Lean will be familiar with Kanban. Simpler, very easy, doesn't really feel like a full-sized framework, though there are some books on it. If you notice behind me, I've got a Kanban board on the wall on my flip chart. I use that fairly regularly to try and organize myself, and it's a really good team management tool. I think it was a good idea for me to pop up DAD there, Disciplined Agile, which is a slightly broader framework around processes that are going to try and get, it's bigger than Scrum. It's around processes around value and things like that. And DevOps, which is becoming really, really valuable, is this concept. You might even say it's not really a project anymore now. We're trying to get to a situation where the IT departments are developing solutions all the time, constantly. There's some of the key frameworks. As I said, there's some more out there. And then there's certain practices, things that we do. Things like test-driven development, where we actually write the test before we write the requirement. You might be familiar with Lean or user stories, where we try and create a persona. So there's a bunch of techniques in there. And what are we trying to achieve with these techniques? Well, I think this is a pretty good model that I've been using now for a few years around the difference between a traditional PMI, Project Management Institute way of looking at things and the empirical way of looking at things. Because we've just discovered we don't know what we want, we don't know how to do it, so what are we going to do? Okay, so I've used this concept of the difference between baking and cooking, okay, as a really simple way to get around things. If we think about baking, and we don't have to be a cook or a bake to understand this. If we think about baking, it's quite scientific. You take your recipe, you figure out what the quantities are, you cook it, and you ship it out, okay? And a good baker does it the same way every single time. A good baker puts the temperature of the oven at the same every time. A good baker buys the same brand of flour again and again. And a good baker might refine their work a little bit if they get a new cooker, but their challenge is to create the very same shaped dough, cake, pastry, whatever it is, again and again. They want it to be the very, very same. So a master baker produces the same thing again and again. As I said, there might be some tweaking when there's major changes. Now, if we think about a cook, making a dinner, there's a different processing of thinking in there. Mainly, they don't use the exact same ingredients every time. They're slightly different. There's a variation. Has anybody tried to buy a chili that's the same twice? They're not, certainly not in this part of the world. So some of the ingredients are different, okay? The quality of if you're using meat is different. There's different aspects involved in that. So to be a good cook, you need to analyze the products that you have in front of you, maybe taste the chili if you're that way inclined, make a call, put it together, test it, taste it, change it, go again. And a good cook is actually tweaking their recipe again and again based on the ingredients, based on the time of year. That's a really good way to think about the defined as being traditional PMI sort of way of looking at it, and empirical being much more an agile approach. Now, if you cook like you bake or you bake like you cook, you're dead. What do I mean? Well, if a baker adds a little bit of extra pinch of salt or adds a little bit of extra flour or liquid or whatever, it ain't going to turn out the same. And if you try and cook like a baker, open up Jamie Oliver's recipe book, follow it by the T, and then you come out and say it's not the same as what Jamie Oliver got. Well, yeah, he's using fresh, whatever, you got it out of the packet. So it's really important to understand the difference. And I'm very much so of the thought process that it really is horses for courses. yes, you can bring elements of one into the other, but you need to be very conscious of when you're doing that. Okay. So look, just to get back to the Agile Manifesto. Okay, so what I've done here is I've shortened some of those long statements from the principles. So I've just shortened them down. And I know when I do this, I get into awful trouble with those who have written the Agile Manifesto. They say, like, I've trimmed it down. But I've done this to try and fit it in. I want to run through these in small groups to try and get across to you the behaviors that might help us deliver on these. So these are the 12 principles from the first slide. And I'm just going to run through them in groups of 3. The first one is satisfying the customer. How are we going to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable stuff? Well, we need to constantly check with the users, check with the customers. We're all the time checking with the customers, the users, coming back to them, showing them what we've done. Is that okay? Is that right? Have you got do you understand? And getting feedback from them constantly. The second one is welcoming change. Yeah, you can see this. You know the way somebody wants to change all the time, it's going to do your head in. All these change requests coming through. But we need to change our brain thinking to that. We need to change our brain thinking to say that actually a change is welcome because it means that the user or the customer understands their requirements better. And by the work that we've done, by satisfying them, they now understand their requirements better. That's a huge brain change for a lot of people who come from a traditional project management background. Now, we're not going to get away with that. If we have change requests coming down the line all the time, we're going to have to create some mechanism to manage those, but at the same time, welcoming them. Okay. And I suppose my line there is, be happy that the customer now knows what they want in more clarity, and be happy that we actually might develop something or create something that we realize is not actually what we wanted, but at least it makes it more clear to us what we want. Our friends in Scrum use a mechanism of change control. They basically say no changes during the sprint. You can make changes in the next phase in a month's time, but no changes now. There's actually a change control process in there. And we do have a change control. Do you want to call it a change control board? We better not. But we do have somebody who's managing the change requests, a product owner. So that's kind of key. So welcoming as a concept, but still having a process that works. Delivering frequently. We need to restructure a project, an agile project, to get value out the door faster. We can't wait till the end to deliver value. So we may need to restructure. Lots of people, especially when I work on agile projects, go, well, unless we get all of this done, unless we get this huge amount done, it's of no value. Well, I think sometimes you need to stop and think, well, hang on. If we did this piece here, the users would get some value. Not a lot of value. There might be still a lot of manual work required. We might have to rekey stuff, but at least they'll get there and they'll get to understand the product, and then we'll be able to build it. And if they end up using a very manual process for a while, they might actually spot some of the problems. Collaborate daily, a very tough one. A very, very tough one to get right, because we don't want business as usual or the customer interfering with a software developer or a project worker who's concentrating on their work every day. So this is a rule that we often break. Okay, we often break, where we sort of say, no, we're going to create a bit of a barrier. Okay, so there might be, you might have to create a barrier, but at the same time, we do want direct connection between the doer and the person with the requirement. I think it's important that there's one instance of this that I remember from, it's a good number of years ago. I was working on an internet banking platform about 20 years ago. And somebody asked me to have a chat with a group of the developers because they didn't get it, they didn't understand it. I sat down with the developers and I was explaining to them about foreign exchange, how you take some money from here and you put it into this bank account, and you take the fees and you put it into that bank account, and you put this into the FX bank account. And the guys at the other end were looking at me going, what, they're bank accounts? And I was going, yeah, what did you think they were? And the guys went, I never thought of it. I said, well, no, you can't just take money out of this bank account and just put it nowhere, or you can't take a lump sum and put it in 2 different places. You have to put it into another bank account. And that bank account is called the foreign exchange bank account, or the Nostro account. And I was explaining, the guys completely didn't. And one of the guys, who was actually Italian, he kind of goes, like Medici, double entry. And I was like going, well, yeah, I presumed you knew that. That's how banking software works. You can't just, the idea here of the hunt was, these guys didn't realize, they just thought they were working with numbers. They didn't realize that these were bank accounts, that they were to behave like bank accounts. And I was absolutely shocked by that. Nobody had sat down with them and explained to them the concepts behind the system, what it was actually doing. They'd never seen an FX trader doing something like this. They'd never, which I found really amazing, that nobody had brought them in to show them what a user was doing with this software, because these are really smart people. One of the guys was a mathematician who was absolutely brilliant. He should have been involved in it. He did know an awful lot, and he was a pretty smart guy. So what I'm really saying is, don't create barriers between business as usual and the project, or the customer and the project. The next one is about supporting and motivating people. We know this. We know highly motivated people, and more importantly, highly motivated teams get through a huge amount of work. Okay, they get through significantly more work than people who are not motivated, and they're better to deal with. They're more enjoyable if they're motivated. As part of that, we need to enable the team, the frontline people, to make their own decisions, to be able to make technical decisions without having to go back all the time. And that, again, we need a mechanism in there. We need to be able to release people so that we're not always waiting on decisions from somewhere else, which means there'll be some mistakes made, which is fine because it's keeping in with our previous ones. Face-to-face conversations are more important. Yeah, reduce the paperwork. Create open environments for face-to-face communication. So we often see things like user stories, and if you've seen user stories, they're short constructs of information. They're great if they're well written, but what we've really done there is we've moved from writing a novel about a requirement to writing a poem. And as you can imagine, writing good poetry is even harder. It's a very strong construct. So a user story is generally short. It might be 3, 5, sometimes 10 lines long. That has to be constructed well. But it actually is not the full requirements. It's the starting point for a discussion about the requirements. So we will still need a face-to-face discussion by what do you mean by a user can log on? What do you mean by a user should have a secure access? Okay. Deliver working stuff. Yeah, get the stuff shipped out. Get it shipped out. All the time trying to get the stuff shipped out in use. What happens, particularly in software development, is somebody writes a piece of code, mightn't be perfect. It sits there for 3 weeks, sometimes 3 months, and then it goes into production. And there's a bug in testing maybe, or pre-production. And the software developer who worked on that, he hasn't seen it, or she hasn't seen it for 3 months. It takes her for ages to remember how this worked. They've moved on. So we've lost some of that in-brain activity. So if we develop it fairly quickly, and we get it tested fairly quickly, and we get it ready for production, we get rid of that reworking. Promoting a sustainable pace. One of the challenges that we have in Agile is, how do I know what's going to be done by Christmas? How do I know what's going to be done by whatever, the next 2 quarters time? Well, we don't know initially, but if we build a sustainable pace where we're producing a certain quantity of deliverables every 2 weeks or every month, and we can see what that quantity is, and perhaps we're even getting a tiny bit better every month, we'll use the word month, well, then we can predict the future. But if we're going up and down, getting to deadlines, never really knowing how good we are, okay, then we can't really predict the future. We're just putting our fingers in the air. So this sustainable pace is actually create a pace, okay, and measure against that pace all the time. And that means that a product owner can kind of look from a distance or say, well, at the moment we're getting through this unit of work. Multiply by that by 12, we should get that shipped out. And you can make predictions about the future. Promote technical excellence. Yeah, this is a bit of a thing about if you do see flaws in the systems, tackle it. Don't leave it till later. Get people involved in quality. Get it fixed. Maximizing the work not done. Stop doing work that doesn't deliver value. Absolutely key. Cut out work that doesn't deliver value, and actually make a conscious effort to cut it out. Why are we getting it signed off by somebody 4 layers ahead of us? That's not a smart way to do it. Will we not be better off getting it signed off by a peer in another team? Something like that. So stop activity that doesn't add value. All the time looking for it. That's a very lean concept. Allow the teams to self-organize. Allow the teams to pick their own work and to share it out between them. So I'm not going to allocate work to Dave or Katrina. I'm going to say allocate work to the team and then allow the team allocate it to themselves. Now, short term, this might cause some grief. Johnny's not as productive as the rest. Well, in actual fact, we've realized that peer pressure and peer promotion is actually a better way to motivate people than promotion from the boss who comes in. So there's a bit of work to do on the self-organizing teams, but with some good guidance, we can actually get them really working well. And they make a very strong contribution to the overall project if they're organizing themselves and they can push back and work saying, hang on a second, we don't have the skills for that. And the final one of the 12 is making sure that we come together regularly as a team. And we reflect not on all the problems in the organization, but first and foremost on what we can do as a team to do better. How could we do things better? And that's a really good starting point, because if you start with what could I do better and what can you do better around your team, it makes it easier to have conversations with the rest of the organization, because we've got, this is what we're doing. This is how we found the challenge. This is how we found that we're not delivering stuff that meets the user's requirements. How could you guys help us be better? And really trying to make it be part of the project, the reflection, really thinking through. Okay. Now, some of my behaviors. You can go into hundreds of behaviors behind the principles. But I think what's interesting is this next slide here is about principles, and you may recognize some of these from the next version of PMBOK. So PMBOK is moving, and I think I spotted there's Frank Turley, I think, is going to give a little session on this in a few weeks' time. But these are the new principles around the PMI that they're going to bring out in the autumn, or towards the end of the year anyway. And they've moved towards 12 principles. They've said, actually, in order to be more dynamic, we should try and deliver principles, not necessarily the detailed techniques, but we need to get principles out there. I think we'll all get a copy of this in September, October, I don't know when exactly, but we're trying to move towards this. And within some of these, you can see some of the PMI processes like quality or risk, but it's to be more principle based around it, around that. So our Agile friends are probably having an influence on PMI, saying, if we're going to try and get these things working together, we need to be less process driven and more principle driven. Okay, great. Just wanted to throw the principles back up there again. Katrina has another little quiz for you guys to see if we can get our heads around these principles. It's not so hard. Can you pop it up there, Katrina, on Menti?
Yeah, guys, so I've popped up the question on Menti. So use the code 228272. And the question that David is asking is, of these 12, which do you think would be easier for you to deliver on, essentially? So you can rank them 1 to 12. You can just rank the top 3 if you like, but if you feel like it, you can rank them all 1 to 12. So if you just pop into 228272, and you'll be able to give your own answer to that. I can share that as well. I'll leave it. Actually, I'll leave your screen up for a second, David, so they can actually see all the principles in front of them on the screen and refer, and then I'll pop over. Yeah, so people are starting to rank them. So we'll give it a minute. Actually, we've got 77 people on the webinar with us, so we've quite a lot, and I think we've about 50 people responding to the Menti, so you should get a nice group to answer questions for you. Yeah. Yeah, so the answers are coming in. I'm wondering, do you normally get a, is there a typical answer that normally comes in for you, or is this different every time, this particular question?
It can be different every time. I think the one that is lowest, I think, is welcoming change. I think most, that certainly throws up as one of the harder ones to do. Generally, because we've all, as project managers in the past, been shown about lessons learning, that can be fairly strong. That can be a fairly strong one on the higher end. And I think a lot of people kind of feel that, yeah, especially if you're from a software background, the other one that kind of often pops up there is business people and developers working together, which I often find a hard one because it is hard, but lots of people say that's something that they would like to try and implement as well.
I think it's interesting, the example that you used, and I'll swap the screens in about 30 seconds so people can see the answers and you can see them. But I think what was interesting there around moving the business closer to the developers so they can talk to each other reminds me of that old World War analogy of send 3 and 4 pence, we're going to a dance, which was meant to be send reinforcements, we're going to advance. And I personally find it in live experience that putting the developer in a room with the business actually helps them to respect each other and understand each other and see each other's points of view, but also you do not lose things in the communication path, which is quite frequently something that happens in waterfall.
Yeah, so it is. I mean, we do have a big challenge now as well, because you know, we do have a lot of remote teams, obviously now, but even going back a while, we have a lot of remote teams. Collaborate daily, yeah, that's a nice one. Yeah, very good.
It's funny, without even looking at that, that's exactly what I was talking about. It's that conversation that takes place that it tends to iron out where there's a confusion or a misunderstanding.
Yeah. And I think to promote sustainable pace is an interesting one. Maybe that's a little bit more American than we're used to here, but our American friends are very, very big into promoting sustainable pace as a business mechanism. You know, you flip the same amount of burgers. It takes 37 seconds to flip a burger. That's it. Why would it take 38? We're not necessarily as good at that in less sort of in more relaxed economies, whereas, you know, the Germans, the Japanese, the Americans just love that.
You've got 49 answers there, so it's interesting to me. It does seem to be the communication ones that are right up at the top here.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Super. Very good.
I expect from your point of view, the point here is that all of them are important. They're just
well they are all important, but you need to be careful as well. Okay, and this has happened. You know, somebody's been on a Scrum course. We're all going to move to Scrum. That's a really bad way to approach it. It's not going to work. Whereas a better way to approach it is look at the Agile principles and say to yourself, okay, which one of these could we bring in to our current way of working? And which one of these might make our jobs easier, better, faster? And say to yourself, right, we've got one of these working now. Why not try another one? And then and you know what, maybe you'll go back, maybe you'll never get down to the end, but I think you're moving towards an Agile understanding, even if you're building, I don't know, skyscrapers that don't necessarily fit the model very well as a construction project or as a project, but you're bringing in some of the ideas here to get closer and to get better value out of what you're delivering. I think that's what we're trying to do.
Very good. I will hand back control to you now. And
well,
what I'll do next, guys, for everyone on the call, is I'll move to the final slide on Menti, which, as always, for us is your opportunity to ask any questions of Dave before we wrap up, and also any comments that you might have. David, from my own personal experience, actually currently that is something that we are doing. We operate in a waterfall environment, but we have actually started to introduce some of the agile principles, like the collaboration, the check-ins, and like bringing in the retrospective more regularly throughout, whereas in a waterfall, the retrospective tends to happen at the end. But and we've definitely found that the collaboration is better between the business and the developers, which is good. So,
and remember, you know, if you look at something like Scrum, what they're actually saying in Scrum is this is a mechanism to try and implement these. So if you've got your own mechanism to implement them, okay, you might be reinventing some of the wheel, but at least you're getting closer. And guys, if you want to contact me, my contacts are on screen there. I'm always delighted to talk to people.
And we will always, I always say this, and I'll say it at the end as well, we do share the recording, assuming that there's never technical glitches with the recording, which there haven't been so far. We do share the recording, and we also do share the slides. So hopefully that saves people the grief of screenshotting everything as they go along, or furiously taking notes. David, I will swap over to the Menti board, if that's okay, and maybe you can see some of the questions that are coming through. Because it's interesting. I know we had this conversation yesterday. Agile is very topical for our members, and it's very important to us because, even as you heard me say there, it is something that we're all starting to experience on a day-to-day basis. So it's part of our working lives now. So hopefully you can see that there, and you can see the questions and comments that are coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the change is encouraged in Agile. It has to have an impact on cost. Yeah, I do see that, and this is not something we're going to find easy. Okay, there is a different way of thinking about the cost conundrum. I don't have the slide here in front of me, but some people rearrange. If you remember the time cost triangle that we've done, the iron triangle, you know, you've got scope, time, and cost. You're kind of saying, well, actually, you know what? If you change one, the other one changes. Well, in actual fact, our friends in Agile are actually saying, well, hang on a second. You know what? What we're trying to do is change a fixed scope and say, well, here's the cost, here's the time, here's your scope. So if somebody's coming back and saying, here's, you know, I've got a change request, well, some other scope is actually going to have to be dropped, end of story, or put further out. That's a decision that you can have, a discussion that you can have with the users. Yeah, now you want this, that's fine, good, we'll do it. But then something else is going to have to go out to another Scrum cycle. Yeah.
Yeah.
A good place to start to learn about Agile. Yeah, look, there's the PMBOK little guide. I actually think that's okay. It's reasonably lightweight. The Agile Manifesto, I think, is really good. I think the Scrum Guide is actually quite a good, simple document to read. Just Google the Scrum Guide. It's okay. And if you want to look around the history around that, that's a good place as well. You get a bit of feeling around that. I must say, I think probably the Scrum Alliance, I've got to say it, aren't they? They have some good stuff in there as well, some good blogs on it. Yeah. Apart from PMI-ACP exam prep, well, I've actually got two. I'm giving 2 ACPs this month, which is the most I've ever given. Not this month, next month. I've never had to get to give 2 in the same month. I actually like the PMI-ACP course. I think it's a really good course. Why? Because it's a little bit of a smorgasbord, Metza, whatever the word you want to use on it, without getting into too much detail. I mean, if you look at something like, I'll go back Kanban, it's simple. You know, you can go on a 5-day Kanban course, but come on. I mean, I don't know what you could do for 5 days on a Kanban course. Draw pictures. You know, you get the concept in something like, you know, 2 hours in a PMI-ACP course and then go off and investigate it. Read Dave Anderson's book if you want to. What other material to pass the PMI-ACP? Oh my God, do you know what? I've got so many books, PMI-ACP books. I've got millions of them. They're falling down around me, and I got some more in the post from somebody else. I look, there's a couple of good books out there. I go on to Amazon and pick a good book on it. Mike Griffiths is always seen as a good book on it. It's terribly expensive. There's another one there whose name, is it Learn First? I can't remember. What I'll do is it okay if I ping on a list of those? It might be the easiest way, because off the top of my head, I can't remember.
That would be great, and I can include that in the slides when I send them out as well, as an extra slide, as a recommendation, or I can send it in the email afterwards. We can follow up after, and you can let me know what works best.
I can see the one in front of me here. For program multiple projects using Agile, yeah, okay. You know what? Our Agile friends have not done a very good job on larger projects. They do not do a good job on larger projects. So Agile works really well for small teams. You know, some people might actually say, well, actually, Agile isn't project management at all. It's team management. Okay, I won't get into that debate here. I don't have time. But Agile has not, to me, proved itself on really large projects. What do I mean by large projects? I mean, once you go past 18 people in a team, Agile has problems. And there's lots of techniques out there. There's lots of people using SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework. Not my favorite, because to me, I would prefer to use program management. It's the same thing. I don't see much difference. I actually think there's more rules involved in this. So I have no good answer for you, except that if you're, for example, a program office or something like that, what you really need to do is figure out what value do you offer an Agile team. Scrum Guide. Scrum is not the same as Agile. Scrum is an implementation of Agile. There's lots of problems with Scrum. Lots of people don't like it, but it is a good introduction to one of the Agile frameworks. Okay, I think it is a good way to understand the most commonly used Agile framework, or the most commonly abused Agile framework. Scrum will not actually fix anything for you, but Scrum will show you what's wrong, I guarantee you. So there's good things in there. So good on saying that small teams for Agile so hard to cross. Yeah, I think very much so. Yeah, look, we need to stop the furious pace. We absolutely need to stop the furious pace, because we need to get teams that are working together. We need to encourage people to learn, especially in software development. If we're not learning, we're not getting anywhere as these people who like and enjoy software development. So we need to put time in where we're not doing a furious pace, where we get this constant delivery. And part of that is not necessarily just software development, but it's actually understanding what processes can we put in place to get sustainable pace. How do we put a process in place that we can deliver regularly? Okay. Can I give an example of how, yeah, I'm going to give you a textbook example of how sustainable pace predicts the future. Okay, so if we estimate how much each story is going to take us, how much effort is required, and we've used some sort of point system for that. Some people use hours. The Agilists don't like hours, just a point system. So this particular feature is 12 points. This particular feature is 20 points. This particular feature is 8 points. And what we do is we measure the first month. How many points did we get through? We got through 48 points. Well, the feature for next month is this amount. The feature for this month is this amount. We can predict how many points we'll get through in the next month. And looking at that, predicting out to the future, we can see how many points we require to get to the end, or how we need to increase pace to get to the end. Now, that's not popular with every Agilista out there. Lots of them hate that. They don't like it. They think it's over pressurizing people. But I've found it useful as a mechanism to measure. But we do need to have the team involved in it. where the team are saying, well, there's a slight variation on that, or if we had this, we get through more work. That's my best answer. How are contracts structured for Agile projects? There's a really good book out there, The 9 Types of Agile Contracts, by a guy, an American living in Switzerland. So there are constructs out there. You'll recognize half of them. If you've done your PMBOK, you'll go through and you go, oh yeah, I get that. And you look at the 6th one, you go, okay, he's just tweaked it. Stevenson is the guy's name. But again, look, Katrina, maybe I'll put a link to that.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, that'd be great.
If you go onto his website, it's $20, but you'll find don't have to pay for it. It's just a donation.
Okay.
How to plan an Agile versus waterfall? Look, we do need a roadmap. We need to have a roadmap in Agile. How far out does the roadmap go? If you ever did Prince 2, they called it the project flow. We need to have a flow looking forward 3 months, 6 months, with a picture of what we think will go into those features in. So this is May, what we think we'll deliver in August, what we think we'll deliver in September, because that's a communication tool. If senior managers come back to the product owner and sort of say, well, September's not good enough for that feature, we really need that in June. That's actually being agile. If we don't have that, everybody's going, I don't know when it's going to come out. I don't know when to tell the customer. I can't really talk to Deutsche Bank because we don't know when this is going to be delivered. No, that's not a fair way to do it. A much better way, and to make that roadmap transparent, the customer can see it.
Yeah, I think probably one of the frustrations that we grapple with as project managers is that we are frequently the ones that have to explain to the to management essentially what's going on. So it's it's having that information and being able to translate how Agile works back to management so they can understand how the planning works as well.
Yep.
Okay, so I've switched screens, David, so thank you very much for answering all of those questions. We can see, and we can certainly see from the schedule that we've put together of the webinar series and the feedback that we get, that Agile is very topical at the moment for our members. So this session has been very helpful, and I think you've already seen some of the feedback coming in on the Mentimeter comments, that it was nice, a good clear session, and it's probably helped people grasp those principles and understand what Agile is all about in the background. So thank you very much for sharing.
If you get me started, I could go on forever. So unfortunately.
Well, we will definitely have you back. I wouldn't. I would say we will continue to have an appetite for this because it is becoming popular. So we need to understand how it works. So guys, as usual, thank you very much for joining us and sitting with us and listening to David as he's gone through the principles of around the framework for Agile. So as always, if you're a member and you're registered and I have your PMI member number, we will automatically register your PDU for you. So that's another PDU towards your certification upkeep, which is great. And we will be sharing the recording and the slides. I will also follow up with David, as you heard there, if there's any books that he wants to recommend, and I pop those into the email that goes out afterwards as well. If you are watching this after the fact as a recording, you can self-register for that PDU as well, and the link is there to do that. Just another reminder then, we have 6 more webinars to go before we wrap up, just for a short summer break, and we'll be back in September. And in the meantime, you can use projectmanagement.com for any additional webinars, and I've popped a few of them in there. And we are also, because at the moment we can't have any face-to-face events, the European collaboration, which is run by Ian Elliott on our committee, is also sharing their webinars from across Europe with us as well. Some of them are in English and some of them are not. So if anyone on the call speaks other languages, you've got an even bigger portfolio of webinars that you can watch in the time being. So that's absolutely everything, guys. So it just leaves me to say, David, thank you so much. You've been a great presenter.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone on the call, and we will leave it there. Goodbye for another day.
Bye-bye.